The train didn't slow down when she stumbled inside. It roared louder, harder, like it sensed her fear and decided to feed on it. Iron wheels screamed against frozen tracks as the royal train carved its way through the mountain pass. Midnight swallowed everything beyond the windows. Snow slammed into the glass in violent bursts, not drifting, not soft, angry, relentless, as if the storm itself was chasing her. The mountains loomed on either side, jagged and merciless, closing in with every mile. She burst into the carriage and barely stayed on her feet. Her boots slipped on ice-coated floors. Her shoulder hit the wall. Pain tore through her side, so sharp it stole the air from her lungs. Blood soaked through her coat, warm and slick against her skin, dripping onto the floor in dark, trembling drops. Every breath came out broken, ragged, like her body was forgetting how to survive. She slammed the door shut behind her. Outside, wolves howled. Not close enough to see. Not far enough to feel safe. The sound wrapped around her heart and squeezed. It reminded her why she couldn't stop. Why stopping meant teeth and claws and hands she once trusted pulling her down into the snow. Fog crept along the windows, thick and slow, curling like fingers searching for a way in. It blurred the world outside until there was nothing left but white and shadow and fear. The carriage felt wrong. Too quiet, too polished. Velvet seats lined the walls. Brass fixtures gleamed softly in the flickering light. This wasn't a place for someone like her. She had gotten into the wrong carriage. Her hands shook as she reached for the lock. Her fingers were numb, clumsy, slick with blood. Panic clawed up her throat as she fumbled, vision swimming. Click. The sound hit her like mercy. She leaned her forehead against the door, chest heaving, whispering nothing, praying to no one. Just a few seconds. That was all she needed. Just a breath. Then the lock clicked again. Slow. Controlled. From the outside. Her breath stopped. Her hand froze on the handle as every muscle in her body went tight. She stared at the door, waiting for it to burst open. Waiting for claws. Waiting for voices she knew too well. Nothing happened. The silence pressed in, heavy and suffocating. The train thundered on, and her heartbeat roared in her ears. She turned slowly, pain flaring bright as lightning through her ribs. Blood dripped from her fingers onto the frost, each drop a reminder that she was running out of time. Unbound. The word burned in her mind like a fresh wound. They'd spoken it aloud when they cast her out. Said it like it explained everything wrong with her. Cursed. Unclaimed. Too dangerous to keep. Too broken to protect. Her chest tightened as memories crashed into her, faces she'd grown up with stepping back, fear replacing love. The elders' voices shaking as they pointed at her like she was already a monster. The cold of the snow beneath her knees when they told her to leave and never come back. Her power stirred beneath her skin. Silver heat pulsed through her veins, restless and sharp, like fire trapped under bone. It licked at her spine and ribs, pushing, demanding to be released. It always came when she was scared, when she was hurt, when she felt cornered. She clenched her fists until her nails bit into her palms. Not now. Not here. If it broke loose, she didn't know what she'd become. She didn't trust herself. She never had. The lights overhead flickered. Once. Twice. Shadows stretched along the walls, pooling where they shouldn't. The air shifted, thickened, charged, heavy with something unseen. Her wolf, silent for so long, curled tight inside her chest. She wasn't alone. She felt it before she heard anything. A presence filled the carriage, calm and unmoving, like it had always been there. Watching. Waiting. Not afraid. Not rushed. Her heart slammed painfully as she turned. A figure stood at the far end of the carriage, half hidden in shadow. Tall. Still. The light caught his eyes first, gold, steady, unblinking. Not glowing. Not wild. Certain. Her breath hitched. He didn't move closer. He didn't need to. Power rolled off him without effort, pressing into the space between them, making it hard to think, harder to breathe. This wasn't the kind of power that shouted. It didn't threaten. It simply existed. Then he spoke. Low. Calm. Close enough to feel. He said her name. Not like an accusation. Not like a sentence. Like it mattered. The silver heat inside her surged in response, wild and frightened, crashing against her control. No one was supposed to know her name. She'd buried it with the life she lost. Her voice came out rough, barely holding together. How do you know me? The man stepped forward just enough for the light to touch his face. A ruler's stillness. A predator's patience. A crown she couldn't see but could feel. Because, he said quietly, girls who survive exile don't disappear. They leave echoes. Outside, the wolves howled again, closer now. The train tore deeper into the frozen mountains, carrying them forward into darkness, into danger, into something she couldn't escape. And if stories where fate bites back and love is forged in danger pull at something inside you, then subscribe to Moonbound Werewolf romance stories, because once you step into our world, there's no turning back. He stepped fully into the light, and the carriage seemed to shrink around him. Not because he filled the space with size, but because he filled it with certainty. Calm. Control sharpened to a blade. The kind of presence that didn't rush, didn't explain, didn't need permission. Gold eyes locked onto her, steady and unreadable, like he'd already measured every way this moment could end. This was his carriage. Everyone knew it the second he claimed the space. She felt it in her bones before her mind caught up. The velvet seats. The reinforced steel walls. The faint sigils etched into the brass. Royal. Untouchable. No pack would dare cross this boundary. Her legs trembled, not from weakness alone, but from instinct. Her wolf stirred again, restless, confused. It didn't snarl. It didn't hide. It leaned toward him. That terrified her more than the wolves outside. You shouldn't be here, she said, though the words sounded thin even to her own ears. Blood soaked deeper into her coat. Pain pulsed with every heartbeat, hot and dizzying. This isn't my place. A corner of his mouth shifted. Not a smile. Not cruelty. Something tired. Something knowing. You ran into the only place you could survive, he said quietly. His voice carried weight without force, each word deliberate. That wasn't an accident. He reached past her and closed the door. The finality of it echoed louder than the click of the lock. Then he slid a heavy iron bar into place and turned a second key, sealing the carriage completely. No sound from outside broke through now. The howls were gone, swallowed by distance and steel. You're not leaving, he said again. Not a threat. A fact. Her back hit the wall as her knees buckled. She slid down slowly, breath shaking, hands slick with blood. Fear crawled up her spine, cold and sharp. Alpha King. She didn't need him to say the title. She felt it pressing against her chest like gravity. He knew what she was. Unbound. Unclaimed. Dangerous. Did they send you? She asked, voice rough. To finish it? If he had, he would have already done it. He crouched in front of her instead, close enough now that she could see the faint scars along his jaw. Old. Deep. Earned. This was not a ruler untouched by violence. This was someone who had walked through it and carried the weight afterward. No, he said simply. They don't command me. His gaze dropped to her side. The blood. The torn fabric. His jaw tightened just slightly. You're hurt. She laughed once, sharp and bitter. That's one word for it. He removed his gloves slowly, setting them aside like nothing else mattered. His hands were large, scarred, steady. A king's hands, used to holding blades and crowns and leves. When he touched her, she flinched. Not because it hurt, but because it didn't. His fingers were warm, careful. He didn't rush, didn't press too hard, didn't look at her like she was fragile or broken. He looked at her like she was real. I won't let you bleed out on my floor, he said. Stay still. I don't take orders anymore, she snapped, fear flashing hot. Not from alphas. Not from kings. His eyes lifted to hers, gold steady, unoffended. Good, he said. Neither do I. He worked in silence, tearing clean cloth, binding the wound with practiced ease. She watched his hands, unable to look away. Every movement was controlled, efficient, but gentle where it mattered. It confused her, made her chest ache in a way pain never had. Her wolf pressed closer inside her, curious now. Listening. "You watched me run," she said suddenly. "You knew." "Yes." "And you still locked the door." "Yes." Her breath caught. "Why?" He paused, just for a heartbeat. Something old and heavy crossed his face. "Because the world is full of people who chase what they fear," he said. "And I've buried enough bodies to know when someone deserves shelter instead." The silence that followed felt intimate. Dangerous. She swallowed. "You don't know me." "I know exile," he said quietly. "I know what it costs." He finished binding her wound and leaned back, giving her space again. The distance felt wrong now. Too empty. "I am not your savior," he continued. "I am a king shaped by war. I have made choices that stain my crown. I protect my realm because no one else will." His gaze held hers, unflinching. "And right now," he said, "you are under my protection." The train thundered on through the frozen mountains, carrying them both forward. One running from what she was, the other standing firm in everything he'd become. Neither of them knew yet that this moment, sealed in steel and silence, had already changed the course of both their lives. The silence after his words pressed in on her, thick and heavy, and that was when the memories began to crawl back. They always did when she stopped running. The train rocked gently beneath them, but in her mind, she was no longer here. She was standing barefoot on frozen stone, moonlight cutting her shadow in half. She remembered the night her wolf first tore free, not in fur, not in claws, but in fire. Silver flame. It had burst from her spine like a scream she didn't know she was holding. Hot. Blinding. Alive. The pack circle had recoiled as one body, elders stumbling back, mouths open in horror. Fire was forbidden. Silver fire was a death sentence whispered in prophecy and burned from record. She remembered the smell first. Not smoke. Not ash. Ozone. Clean and sharp, like lightning splitting the sky. Someone had shouted her name like it was a curse. Someone else had called her corrupted. The alpha of her birth pack hadn't stepped forward. He hadn't defended her. He'd looked at her like she was already gone. The carriage lights flickered softly, pulling her halfway back. Her breath hitched, shallow and uneven. Her hands curled into the fabric beneath her, knuckles white. "They didn't even ask me what it was," she said suddenly. Her voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. "They just decided." The Alpha King didn't interrupt. He didn't rush her words. He simply listened, eyes steady, posture still. "They dragged me into the circle at dawn," she continued. "Made everyone watch. Said it was for unity. For safety." Her throat tightened. "They branded me unbound before the sun fully rose." She felt it again. The burn of the mark searing into her skin, the smell of her own flesh, the way the snow beneath her knees had turned slushy with melted ice and blood. The way no one met her eyes. "They stripped me of my name," she said. "Told me I was no longer pack. No longer kin. Just a threat waiting to happen." Her gaze dropped to her hands, still faintly glowing beneath the skin, like embers that never fully cooled. "They marched me past the boundary stones and told me not to come back," she whispered. "Said if I did, they'd hunt me like an animal." The word animal scraped something raw inside her. The Alpha King's jaw tightened, just enough for her to notice. Not anger flaring outward. Anger folded inward. The kind that learned patience because it had nowhere else to go. "You survived," he said. She let out a humorless breath. "I learned how to disappear." She told him about the weeks that followed. Sleeping in ice caves. Burning herself by accident when fear took over. Waking to scorched earth where she'd collapsed. How every time she closed her eyes, she saw their faces. Elders she'd trusted, wolves she'd grown up beside, watching her be erased. "I don't trust power," she said. "Not mine. Not yours. Power only loves you when it can control you." She waited for denial. For anger. for him to remind her who he was. It never came. Instead, he met her gaze with something far worse than fear: recognition. "They feared what they couldn't command," he said quietly. "And they punished you for surviving it." That was the moment something inside her cracked. Because he wasn't looking at her like she was broken, or dangerous, or wrong. He was looking at her like she was unfinished. Her wolf stirred again, slow and uncertain. Not reaching for him, not retreating either. Just listening. "That unsettles you," he said, watching her closely. "The fact that I'm not afraid." "Yes," she admitted, the word barely audible. "Fear, I understand. Hatred too. But this..." She gestured between them, frustration bleeding through. "This feels like standing too close to a fire and not knowing if it will warm you or burn you alive." A faint exhale left him, something between a breath and a laugh. "I've stood in that fire before." She studied his face then. The lines carved by years of command, the weight behind his eyes. This was not a man untouched by loss. This was someone who had buried too much and kept going anyway. "I don't want redemption," she said. "I don't want a prophecy or a crown or a pack that suddenly decides I'm useful." "Good," he replied, "because that isn't what this is." The train surged forward through the mountains, steel cutting ice, fate dragging them closer to something neither had named yet. She leaned back against the wall, exhaustion finally claiming her. For the first time since exile, she wasn't bracing for the next blow. And that frightened her more than running ever had. Because safety, she had learned, was the most dangerous illusion of all. The train slowed like it was fighting the mountain itself, metal screaming softly as the wheels ground against ice. When it finally stopped, the silence felt deliberate. Heavy, as if the world had been waiting for her to arrive. The Alpha King stepped down first, boots sinking into snow untouched by tracks or time. The air here was colder than anywhere else, sharp enough to sting her lungs. Pines loomed like watchful sentinels, their branches bowed under frost. Ahead, half buried in ice and stone, stood the shrine. It wasn't grand. It wasn't welcoming. It was old in the way bones are old, enduring, patient, dangerous if disturbed. She felt it before she saw it clearly. A pull low in her chest. Not fear. Not hunger. Recognition. "This place is forbidden," she said, voice tight. "It's forgotten," he corrected. "There's a difference." Each step toward it made her skin prickle. The silver heat inside her stirred, not wild this time, but alert. Like something waking from a long sleep. The runes carved into the stone were dull at first, cracked and faded by centuries of snow and silence. Then she crossed the threshold. Light snapped to life. Silver symbols flared along the altar, crawling like living things. The ground hummed beneath her feet. The air thickened, pressing against her ears until the world narrowed to breath and heartbeat. She staggered, grabbing the edge of the stone as visions slammed into her without mercy. Wolves, ancient and massive, bowed their heads as she passed. Not in submission. In acknowledgement. A crown rose from flame, forged not by hands but by will, its surface alive with silver fire. Lands burned under a blackened sky, then bloomed again, green breaking through ash. She saw herself standing at the center of it all, fire in her veins, eyes bright with something fierce and unyielding. Voices layered over one another, whispering through time. The one with the mark. Child of the flame. She who is cast out will return crowned in fire. She cried out, dropping to her knees as the weight of it crushed her chest. "No," she whispered. "You're wrong. You don't know me." The fire surged, responding to her fear, licking just beneath her skin. Images fractured, Pax kneeling, blood on snow, her hands glowing as the earth split open. She pressed her palms to the frozen ground, grounding herself in the cold. "I don't want this," she said, voice breaking. "I didn't ask for it. I'm not strong enough." The whispers softened, but they didn't fade. "You survived. You endured. You burned and did not break." Behind her, the Alpha King didn't move. He didn't reach for her. He watched like a man witnessing the truth of the world rearrange itself. The runes reflected in his eyes, silver against gold. When the visions finally released her, she slumped forward, breath ragged, hair damp with sweat despite the cold. The shrine dimmed, light retreating into stone like it had never been there at all. "I'm not a savior," she said hoarsely. "I'm not a symbol. I'm just someone they threw away." He stepped closer then, slow, deliberate, stopping just short of touching her. "They threw you away because they were afraid of what you could become." She shook her head, tears freezing on her lashes. "Or because I really am a monster." Silence stretched between them, broken only by the wind threading through the trees. "You know what I saw," he said quietly. "Not a weapon. Not a curse." His voice lowered, roughened by something close to awe. "I saw choice." She looked up at him, startled. "Every vision showed fire," he continued. "But fire doesn't only destroy. It warms. It clears space for something new. What you become, that's still yours." The pull inside her hadn't gone away. It had settled, coiled deep, patient. Destiny, maybe. Or maybe just the truth she'd been running from. She rose unsteadily to her feet, meeting his gaze. For the first time, she didn't look away. "If this is real," she said, "it will cost everything." His mouth curved, not in a smile, but in something resolute. "It already has." The mountain groaned softly around them, snow shifting, as if the land itself had taken notice. And somewhere deep beneath the ice, something ancient stirred, awake now, and watching her closely. The wind shifted first. Not the gentle mountain breath from before, but something sharp and wrong, carrying the stink of unfamiliar wolves and old resentment. The Alpha King felt it at the same moment she did. His shoulders tightened. Her pulse spiked. They were no longer alone. Footsteps crunched through the snow beyond the shrine. Then more. Shapes emerged between the trees, tall, broad, crowned with power and arrogance.
Rival Alfes.
Pack emissaries. Wolves who had followed rumors instead of sense. Their gazes snapped to her, like knives finding flesh. Whispers spread fast. "Fear always did." "That's her," someone hissed. "The exile." "The one from the prophecy," another said, voice thick with dread rather than wonder. The shrine reacted again, runes flickering uneasily, as if aware it had drawn too much attention. The Alpha King stepped forward, placing himself half a pace in front of her. Not shielding her fully. Not stepping away either. An elder wolf with scarred hands lifted his staff. "This ground is sacred," he barked. "You dare bring her here?" "She didn't come to claim anything," the Alpha King said evenly. "She came because the land called her." A laugh cut through the cold. "Or because she's a curse that follows you now." The accusation landed hard. She felt it in her ribs, in the old cracks that never truly healed. Faces blurred into memories, hands pointing, voices condemning, snow biting her bare feet as she was cast out. The silver heat stirred, agitated by fear and anger. She clenched her fists, fighting it down. Then the forest screamed. Shadows poured from between the trees, wrong-shaped and fast, eyes burning with hunger that wasn't natural. Shadow beasts, drawn by power, by her. "Defensive line," someone shouted.
Stilrang.
Wolves shifted mid-stride, bones snapping, fur bursting through skin. The chaos erupted around the shrine. Snow churned red and black. She backed away instinctively, heart hammering as a beast lunged for her. The Alpha King tore it apart before it reached her, moving with brutal efficiency. Blood steamed on the snow. He didn't look back at her. He couldn't afford to. More beasts came. Too many. "They're drawn to her," a rival alpha roared. "She's the source." Fear tipped into fury. "Send her away," another voice shouted. "Before she brings worse." She stood frozen, watching wolves fall, watching the land suffer because she existed. The vow she'd made at the shrine wavered under the weight of reality. An elder turned to the Alpha King, eyes hard. "You must choose. Your people or her." For one heartbeat, The world narrowed to his face. He hesitated. It was brief. Barely a breath. But she saw it. Felt it like a blade sliding between her ribs. A king weighing losses. A man counting lives. That was enough. She stepped back, then further. The noise of battle dulling behind the rush of blood in her ears. The silver heat surged, begging to be unleashed, to end everything in fire. She swallowed it down with a sob lodged tight in her throat. "I won't be your war," she said softly, though no one heard her over the chaos. She turned and ran. Snow swallowed her footprints almost immediately, like the mountain itself was erasing her. Behind her, the fight raged on, but she didn't look back. She couldn't. If she did, she might break. Or worse, burn everything to the ground. Her chest ached with more than exertion. Trust, fragile and newly formed, splintered with every step. She dared to believe, dared to hope that maybe this time would be different. It wasn't. The wind howled louder, wrapping around her like judgment. Tears froze on her cheeks, but her eyes burned clear. Never again, she swore silently. Never again would she wait to be chosen. Never again would she shrink to make others feel safe. If the world insisted on seeing her as a threat, she would become something they couldn't cast out. Something they couldn't ignore. Far behind her, the shrine cracked with a sound like thunder, ancient stone fracturing under power long restrained. And as she disappeared into the storm, the silver flame finally answered her vow, quietly, steadily, and with terrifying promise. She had found refuge in a cave carved into the mountainside, hidden beneath snow-laden pines. The storm outside raged still, but inside, the fire they'd coaxed from wetwood flickered warm against rough stone. Shadows danced across her face, and for the first time in days, she let herself breathe. He sat opposite her, knees drawn up, eyes fixed on the flames as if counting every flicker. The silence between them was heavy, not uncomfortable, but charged, like the air before a lightning strike. "I've lost more than you can imagine," he said finally, voice low, almost broken. "People I swore I'd protect. I failed them all." She flinched at the honesty, the weight of it pressing against her chest. It wasn't the voice of a king claiming power, it was a man confessing his own ghosts. "And yet you keep going," she said softly, almost a whisper.
Why?
He lifted his gaze then, eyes gold against firelight, raw and unflinching. "Because if I don't, everything falls apart. Because if I stop, nothing remains. Because someone has to carry the burden that others cannot bear." The fire crackled, and she felt the heat against her skin as she unclenched her fists. For the first time, she thought maybe he understood what it meant to survive when the world rejected you. "I never asked for this," she admitted, voice tight, fingers brushing the hem of her coat. "Not my power. Not my fate. I didn't ask to be hunted or cursed or needed." He leaned closer, subtle, careful, like a predator testing distance rather than closing in to kill. "But you survived. You endured. That's more than most could claim." Her wolf stirred beneath her skin, restless, alert. It was curious about him, about this calm strength that didn't threaten or demand. And she felt it too. Something magnetic, pulling, a tension that wasn't purely danger, it was recognition. Connection. "I'm dangerous," she said quietly, letting her voice drop to almost nothing. "Not just to them, to myself. I can't control it yet. And I've hurt people before. I'm afraid of what I'll become." His hands moved slowly toward hers, hovering, not touching yet. "I see you," he murmured. "All of you. Every shard. Every shadow. Every spark you think you've hidden." She swallowed hard, heart hammering in her chest. The firelight flickered across his features, softening the lines of war and authority into something human. The ache of loneliness, of exile, pressed against her ribs, and for the first time, she wanted to let it in.
To let him in.
Their faces drew closer, the warmth of his presence brushing against her skin. Breath mingled with smoke and frost. Her wolf twitched instinctively, unsure whether to flee or embrace. Don't, she whispered, almost panicked, pulling slightly back. Fear and caution tangled with desire. I can't. He paused, gaze steady, patient. Not pressing. Not demanding. Just holding. I'm not asking you to trust me, he said, voice raw, intimate. I'm telling you I see you. And if you let me, I'll be here. Even if the world isn't. Her chest tightened. She wanted to believe him. She wanted the fire, the warmth, the safety he offered. But the memory of exile, of betrayal, clawed at her. She had learned that trust came with a price, that hope could burn. She closed her eyes for a heartbeat, letting the fire's warmth seep in, letting his steady presence seep in, letting herself feel the pull she had resisted since the first silver flame rose inside her. His voice came again, softer, yet certain. I see you. All of you. And in that moment, something fragile and dangerous took root between them. A spark that was neither fear nor desire, but a mixture of both. Trust, threaded with tension. Hope, threaded with uncertainty. Their lips nearly met. A breath apart. Almost a kiss. But the storm outside reminded her of the world waiting, wolves in the shadows, rivals plotting, the mountain holding its own secrets. She stepped back, trembling, guilt and longing tangled together. He didn't reach to stop her. Didn't scold. Only his eyes, golden, knowing, unwavering, followed her every movement. For the first time since exile, she felt seen.
Whole.
Dangerous. Vulnerable.
And alive.
The fire crackled between them, and though silence fell again, it was not empty. It was thick with unspoken promises, unspoken questions, and the slow, undeniable draw of two fractured souls beginning to recognize the shape of one another. In the shadows of the cave, beneath the storm and ice, she understood something terrifying and thrilling. That connection could save her, or destroy her. And still she wanted it. The sun had barely risen over the jagged peaks when the horn sounded. A signal she knew too well, one of summoning, of judgment. Her stomach churned with dread as she and the Alpha King approached the council grounds. What should have been a quiet, guarded meeting became a stage for spectacle. Before she could step forward, voices rose, harsh, accusing, and loud enough to pierce the cold morning air. She is the exile, an elder cried. The one they branded. She carries the curse of the silver flame. Another stepped forward, robes swishing, eyes glittering with malice. The prophecy has been misinterpreted. She is not the savior. She is the destroyer. The lands themselves tremble at her birthright. Her breath caught. The words hit like jagged stones, cutting through the fragile calm she had clung to in the cave. Faces in the crowd blurred into a sea of judgment. Wolves she had never known, elders who had never cared, all turning to her with fear and hatred. I'm not, she began, but her voice faltered under the weight of their condemnation. Then it happened. Magical chains, glowing faintly with frost and shadow, erupted from the council circle. They wrapped around her wrists, her ankles, biting into skin and muscle. She struggled, but their magic was old, binding, designed to restrain even the strongest of shifters. The Alpha King stepped forward, a deep, low growl vibrating from his chest. His gold eyes flared with fury as he surveyed the council's twisted smirks. You dare bind her in my presence. His voice carried across the cold courtyard, sharp as steel. They've made their choice, one of the counselors said, voice oily with triumph. Even you cannot deny the danger she brings. The flames leak from her veins. If she is allowed to live unbound, everything is lost. Her body trembled. The silver heat beneath her skin responded to the chains, searing outward in waves, small flames flickering across her arms, leaving faint burn marks on stone and snow alike. The energy was wild, uncontrollable. The very air around her shimmered with power. Stop this, the Alpha King commanded, stepping closer, but even he hesitated. The council's power was ancient, rooted in law and fear, and his own loyalties tugged in directions he couldn't speak aloud. She looked up at him, desperation burning behind her eyes. "Do you choose them?" she whispered, voice raw and trembling. "Or me?" He froze, jaw tight, fingers flexing at his sides. That brief hesitation, the fraction of a heartbeat where he seemed torn between duty and desire, felt like a knife plunging into her chest. She realized then that her safety, her freedom, rested entirely on a man who carried the weight of an entire pack, a crown heavy with death and expectation. The chains bit deeper. Silver sparks hissed where the metal touched her skin. The magic pulsed with her fear, her rage, her refusal to submit. And as the council's whispers grew louder, a single thought crystallized in her mind. She would no longer be powerless. A flicker of silver flame ignited across her forearms, spreading upward in a slow, mesmerizing burn. It was not yet destruction, it was warning. Every onlooker froze, the council paling, the Alpha King stiffening beside her. Her eyes, bright with heat and defiance, met his. "I am not your sacrifice," she said, voice echoing, shaking but unwavering. "I am not your weapon. I am not your pawn. And I will not be bound by fear." The council recoiled, muttering incantations to tighten the chains, but the silver flame pulsed, resisting. It leapt along the metal, coiling around her wrists like liquid light. Her wolf stirred beneath the skin, furious and alive, responding to her command, to her will. The Alpha King's expression shifted then, from hesitation to resolve. He stepped fully in front of her, stance protective, muscles coiled like a predator ready to strike.
"No," he said. "She is not yours to condemn.
She is not yours to bind." But the council did not falter. They had centuries of authority, and their fear of her power was a shield against reason. He could only fight them so far without revealing his own vulnerabilities, his own enemies waiting beyond the mountains. Silver flames licked higher along her arms. She lifted her chin, defiance burning as fiercely as the magic beneath her skin. "I will not be powerless again," she said, voice low, steady, and deadly. "I will not wait for someone else to decide if I live or if I burn." The courtyard seemed to hold its breath. Snow swirled around her boots, carrying ash and frost, as the council and their minions took a cautious step back. Even the Alpha King's stance, protective and commanding, betrayed the reality they all knew. She had become more than exile, more than prophecy. She had become unstoppable. And in that moment, she vowed silently, fully, that betrayal, fear, or doubt would never bind her again.
Not them.
Not him. Not herself. The silver flame pulsed in response, a living heartbeat of power and defiance, searing into the stone, the air, and every soul who dared to witness it. The world had finally seen her, not as a pawn, not as a monster, but as something far greater. And it would never forget. The chains shattered with a sound like thunder, fragments of enchanted metal flying into the snow, sparkling as if the air itself had caught fire. She fell to her knees for a heartbeat, letting the silver flame pulse through every vein, every fiber of muscle, every nerve. But this time, she didn't fight it. She welcomed it. She let it rise. A low hum began under her feet, subtle at first, like the earth whispering in a language only she could understand. Then it grew, deep and resonant, shaking the stones of the council courtyard, rattling the frozen trees at the edges of the clearing. Her ancestors, the voices she had only felt in fleeting dreams, in silver sparks under her skin, spoke now with clarity, urgency, and power.
"Rise.
Take what is yours. Burn the fear. Claim the fire." She rose slowly, deliberately, letting the energy flow through her, unbound and undeniable. Snow and frost lifted in spiraling eddies, as if even the mountain itself bowed to her awakening. Her hair whipped around her face, streaked with flame light, eyes bright, pupils slitted with primal intensity. Every breath she drew fed the fire within her. Every heartbeat echoed with authority she had never known she possessed. The ruins of the shrine reacted. Runes that had once lain dormant blazed with silver light, cascading across stone like molten lightning. Ice cracked along the edges of the altar, ancient carvings glowing as the energy of centuries surged into the air. She felt the pulse of every living thing, wolf, tree, snow, and stone, all acknowledging her, trembling with her power. The Alpha King stepped forward, boots crunching on the frozen ground, his presence a steady anchor beside her. He didn't reach to stop her, didn't try to command or control. He only stood there, equal and unwavering, his gold eyes reflecting the silver blaze erupting from her. "You've claimed it," he said, voice low, rough with awe and something closer to pride than he ever let himself feel aloud. "I didn't claim it," she whispered, voice rising with a flame. "It claimed me, and I will not be sacrificed. Not for fear. Not for them. Not for anyone." The ground trembled beneath her again, fissures spiderwebbing across stone and ice. Sparks of silver leapt into the air, crackling with energy as if the air itself had caught fire. Wolves in the distance howled, some sensing the shift, some drawn by the unmistakable pulse of power. Shadow beasts skittered backward into the forest, unwilling to confront the force that now radiated from her. She lifted her arms, and the light answered, spiraling outward in ribbons of silver flame that coiled around the ruins, flowing through the courtyard, burning fear into the hearts of the council and their followers. And yet, the light did not destroy indiscriminately. It revealed, illuminated, awakened. Every shadow fled. Every hesitation faltered. Every lie and accusation fell away under the brilliance of her presence. The Alpha King drew closer, careful, deliberate, until their shoulders brushed. No hesitation now. No unspoken tension of caution. Just two forces standing side by side, raw, unyielding, undeniable. The fire reflected in his eyes, and for the first time, she didn't feel alone. "You're unstoppable," he breathed. "Not because of prophecy. Not because of power. But because you refuse to be anything less." The words were a spark in her chest, feeding the flame she had nurtured for too long in hiding. She tilted her head, hair flame with silver light, and for a heartbeat, the world seemed to pause. Even the wind stilled, holding its breath, as if nature itself waited for her next move. Then she spoke, voice ringing over the trembling earth, clear and unafraid. "I am not your sacrifice. I am not your weapon. I am me." The Alpha King's hand brushed hers, gentle but firm. Connection. Recognition.
Alliance.
Not dominance. Not ownership.
Equality.
The light surged higher, enveloping them both, the ruins and the snow-laden pines in a brilliance that erased fear, erased doubt. She stood taller than she had ever stood, chest lifted, spine straight, eyes blazing with power tempered by purpose. She was no longer the hunted, no longer the exile. She was the fire incarnate, the silver flame, the culmination of all she had suffered and survived. The council cowered, the shadow beasts fled, the mountains groaned. And somewhere deep beneath the ice, the voices of her ancestors sang, not warnings, not curses, but praise, acknowledgement, a promise kept across generations. The Alpha King leaned close, voice low and steady.
"Together," he said.
"We face what comes next."
"No hesitation. No compromise."
She met his gaze, every ounce of fear replaced by resolve. "Together," she echoed. The light pulsed one last time, then settled like a living aura around her, humming with power, promise, and unbreakable will. She had claimed it all, power, destiny, and herself. And in that moment, she knew, with terrifying and thrilling certainty, that nothing would ever be the same. Not for them. Not for the world. Not for anyone who had doubted the fire she carried. The winds had calmed, leaving only the echo of her silver flame pulsing softly through the frozen mountains. The council lay scattered, their fear still palpable, but the world itself seemed to hold its breath. Every snowflake, every branch, every distant howl felt suspended in the weight of what had just unfolded. She stood at the center of the ruins, chest rising and falling with steady, controlled breaths. Her eyes still glowed faintly with residual flame, the power within her no longer threatening but alive, aware and tempered. Yet beneath the triumph, a tremor lingered, not of fear, but of question. Would anyone ever understand what it took to survive this long, to fight when the world declared you cursed? To rise when every hand that should have guided you had tried to bind you in chains? Beside her, the Alpha King's presence was unwavering, solid, an anchor in the storm she'd carried inside for years. His eyes met hers, not with judgment, not with claim, but with recognition. He knew the cost, the isolation, the danger. And still, he chose to stand here with her. Yet the question lingered, sharp and insistent, cutting through the stillness like frost on stone. Would others have done the same? Would they have stepped forward? Or would they have turned away, frightened by the power she could barely yet comprehend, by the fire she had learned to wield? The mountains whispered secrets in the gaps between the snow-laden trees. The wind carried voices, some warnings, some awe, some sorrow, but all acknowledging that the balance had shifted. Her destiny, once hidden, now radiated in silver light, visible to all who dared witness. She turned her gaze to the distant horizon, where shadows of wolves traced the treeline, their eyes glinting with curiosity and caution. Somewhere out there, the world was watching, waiting, fearing, hoping, and she knew, deep in her bones, that she could not retreat anymore. Not from the prophecy, not from her own power, not from herself. Her voice broke the silence, low, almost a whisper to the wind, carrying more weight than any shout could. If you stand against me, beware. If you stand with me, you will burn with me. The Alpha King's hand brushed against hers again, not in command, not in demand, but in solidarity. Two forces, aligned by fate, by fire, and by choice. Together, untouchable, unstoppable, yet vulnerable in the way only two souls bound by shared struggle could be. And in the quiet aftermath of devastation and triumph, one question hung, haunting and irresistible, echoing through the bones of the mountains and the hearts of those who would hear it. Would you have chosen her, or feared her too? Because power is seductive, and survival is only the beginning. Loyalty is tested, hearts are burned, and the world has a way of demanding that you pick a side, before the flames consume everything. If this story lit something inside you, a spark of courage, a flicker of longing, or the thrill of a world where danger and love are inseparable, then step forward. Subscribe to Moonbound Werewolf Romance Stories. Because here we tell tales that burn, stories that cling to your chest, that shiver along your spine, that haunt your dreams long after the page has ended. And as the snow settles and the light fades over the frozen ruins, remember, the choice is always yours. To stand with the fire, or to let it pass. The mountains are silent now, but the echoes remain. The fire remains. And she waits, watching, waiting for the world to decide if it has the courage to stand by her side. The snow had settled again, soft and deceptively peaceful, blanketing the ruins in a quiet that felt almost sacred. Her silver flame dimmed to a faint glow, still warm beneath her skin, pulsing like a heartbeat against the cold. She stood tall, shoulders squared, breath fogging in the icy air, the Alpha King at her side, both figures framed against the jagged peaks that had witnessed centuries of legend. But the world was never still for long. The ground beneath their boots shivered, a subtle tremor at first, then rolling outward like the echo of a heartbeat too deep to ignore. The snow rattled on the branches. Frost cracked along ancient stones. A distant howl rose, low and questioning, as if the wilderness itself sensed a shift, an imbalance, something stirring beyond the veil of sight. Her instincts prickled, a familiar tingle that whispered danger, mystery, and inevitability. The silver flame responded, flickering, alive, eager. She felt it not just in herself, but in the world around her. The forest, the peaks, the winds that cut like knives across frozen ridges. The magic was old. It remembered. And it was awakening again. Then, a voice, so soft it might have been the wind, yet threaded with certainty, reverberated through the air and her bones. She is not the only one. The words lingered, curling around the ruins, echoing through the valley, sinking into the snow, the trees, and the earth itself. The Alpha King stiffened beside her, jaw tight, eyes narrowing. He felt it too, the knowledge that their victory was temporary, that the power they had glimpsed was far from the end of the story. The true Alpha hasn't risen yet, the voice continued, almost like a promise and a warning intertwined, carried on a gust of cold wind that made her hair whip across her face. She exhaled slowly, silver warmth still humming through her veins, a mixture of defiance and awareness settling over her. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Whoever, or whatever, had spoken from the shadows held secrets, powers, and ambitions that dwarfed even what she had just claimed. The prophecy was far from complete, and the future, unpredictable and dangerous, was waiting. The Alpha King's hand found hers once more, steadying, reassuring, a reminder that they had survived, risen, and claimed power together, but that survival was merely the beginning. His eyes met hers, and in that silent exchange, she knew the same truth she felt in every nerve and fiber of her being. They would face it all, but not without challenge, not without sacrifice, and not without loss. The ruins themselves seemed to breathe, cracks glowing faintly as if anticipating the next firestorm. The mountains loomed around them like ancient sentinels, holding secrets of their own, guarding truths that would not be revealed easily. She turned her gaze toward the horizon, where shadows lingered just beyond the tree line, watching, waiting, calculating. The wind carried distant howls again, this time layered with unfamiliar tones, wolves not from her pack, some larger, older, and hungrier, sensing the awakening of power, the call of something greater. Her pulse quickened, a mixture of thrill, fear, and anticipation. She had tasted what it was to wield true power, to claim herself, and now she knew the world would not let her rest. The Alpha King's voice broke the silence, low and deliberate, almost a growl of warning. They are coming, and when they do, we will not be ready for what waits beyond this peace. She nodded, silver light flickering faintly under her skin, pulse in rhythm with the earth's tremor. Then we will rise, she whispered, voice firm, resolute. Not as pawns, not as hunted, but as fire. And nothing will stop us. The wind swirled, carrying whispers, echoes of prophecy, fragments of power, and threats she could not yet name. Somewhere in the shadows, hidden in the folds of mountain and forest, something waited, watching, measuring, preparing for the moment when she would face not just enemies, but destiny itself. And the shadows spoke again, so faintly that the words seemed like a caress and a threat at once. She is not the only one. The true Alpha hasn't risen yet. She tightened her grip on the Alpha King's hand, feeling strength, trust, and connection pulse through that single touch. Whatever was coming, she would not face it alone, but she also knew that the path ahead would demand more than courage. It would demand sacrifice, fire, and a willingness to claim not only power but destiny itself. The mountains were silent once more, but the tremor lingered beneath the snow, a warning, a heartbeat, a promise of the storm to come. The world had shifted. The prophecy had only just begun. And somewhere, in the gathering darkness beyond the peaks, eyes glinted, shadows stirred, and a whisper carried through the wind. The true Alpha hasn't risen yet. The future waited, dangerous and relentless, and she, scarred, powerful, unbound, stood ready, flame alive, eyes blazing, heartbeat synchronized with the pulse of the world.
This was not the end.
This was merely the beginning.